Hello and welcome to the Tosca fake name generator demo. I'm going to be going through the steps of completing this tutorial and kind of a walkthrough of what I learned, what I did, the result of this, and then just kind of talking through the steps as we go. So first and foremost, this is my first introduction to the software, so I understand there's probably some things that I do that are not entirely correct or the proper way to do them, but this is how I kind of gleaned how to perform these steps and how to do what I was supposed to do by going through the information on the website and the support page. So first and foremost, we're going to go ahead and go to Project, create a new project. So this is going to be, I believe, no repository. So I'm going to name this workspace the fake name generator demo, and I will use the workspace template, and this is done to bring in some default modules which I'll be using over the course of the demo for a few specific tasks. I'm going to hit OK. That's going to create the workspace, bring it up immediately, and give me a place to begin my work. Right, so it is loading. Okay, here we go. So here's the basic layout of the test case. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new folder. So what we have standard modules that we'll kind of cover at some point, but here I'm going to create a new folder up here. And I'll use this for the test case that I'm currently doing. So it's going to be the RNG demo. I'm going to go ahead and drag this to the top, so I'm using the topmost folder to go over what I'll be, everything that I'll be creating, I'll be putting up in the topmost is the most prominent. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead and create a new test case. What test cases are, this is essentially what I'm going to be making. This is going to be the testing scenario that runs through the website, figures out, or I give it the values that it'll be using. It's going to run through the steps of what the test should be, and this is going to be where that's all created. So here I'm going to name this generate random person. I apologize for overly loud keyboard. I don't exactly have a setup for video recording and audio recording that's anywhere near decent, so apologize for that. But we'll go ahead and do the generate random person. So now we're going to work in the modules, and this is where we create the steps essentially of how we're going to go through this whole process. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to move modules up here. So if I click and drag it, I'm able to attach it to a certain part of the screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it over to the right side of the screen so that I'm able to look at, let me go back over here to test cases. So I'm able to look at both the test case where I'm going to be including these modules and the modules themselves where I'll be working. So in the modules tab, I'll right click on the modules folder and I will create a new folder in much the same way as I did under the test cases. And I'm going to name this RNG demo. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to move this up to the top so that I'm working in the top section. Next, I'm going to open Internet Explorer. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the fake name generator, which I will be using to pull the information off of and then to use as my test case. So back over here to Tosca, we will right-click on the RNG demo folder in the modules, and we're going to use the scan application feature, which is going to let us pick an application that's currently running on the desktop and pull some information from that to create a module that we'll be using to run our test cases. So here we can see I have a couple different things up. So we're going to be picking the Internet Explorer window, which has the website that we're planning on using. Okay, and then we're going to use the select on screen option here so that we know, instead of kind of looking through here, we could go through this whole list. There's only a couple things we need. We're only after the name set and country and name set and country dropdowns, and the generate button, which we can see here, but I'll just go ahead and show select on screen now. So in this case, we want the name set, we want the country, and we want the generate button. These are the only two things that we're really planning on updating. And I am, okay, sorry. Something is going on with my mouse right now. Okay. Go ahead and hit done. Hopefully. All right. So I have the name set, I have the country, and I have generate. They're all, as it says down here, uniquely identifiable. We'll find out exactly what that means in a step later. So I will save this. That should close out here. Oh, I saved it twice. So let me go ahead and delete one of those. And I can rename this to be something that's more obvious to what I'm doing in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and name this one Generate Random Identity. Okay, so we have here our first module to say, all right, we're looking at this particular web page, we're looking at the name set, the country, and the generate button. So I'm going to go ahead and make another one because I know that I will have a couple more things that I'll be using. So in this case, we'll do the same thing. Actually, not entirely accurate. Okay, so in this case, so when we're making one, I went ahead and chose to do a Hobbit since I found it, and that seemed entertaining to me. And then, you know, Danish Hobbit seems correct. So the next page that we're going to have to look at, because part of this test case is we have to generate a random name, which in this case, that would be the step to do. We would create a name set, or we would select a name set, we would select a country, and go to generate. That would select our first random name. The second step is we have to save variables of the name, the address, and the phone number to compare to another generator that we'll do later. And so we'll see here up at the top, based on the selection of the first name set and country, the page name has changed. So in this case, we'll need to go back to Tosca and create a new scan of this website. Since we have a new URL, we want to make sure we're getting the correct information. So I'll come in here, do the same thing, we'll select on screen. Again, we're going to want the name set and the country. We're also now going to need the name, the address, and the phone number. So we will go ahead and select done here. Hopefully this won't cause as big of a problem as it did last time. So here, I just wanted to stop for a moment and go down to the H3, the div, and the DD. So this section and the subsequent parts around it took me a considerable amount of time to figure out. So if you can see the name set, the country, and the generate, they all had uniquely identifiable elements. They all have this nice little icon here. This is a type of list. This is a button. And however, we get down here, and these are unknown properties. They're called generic GUIs, and they don't really have any controls associated with them of how they're supposed to operate. So in my thought process of kind of digging through and trying to figure out how it is I'm supposed to save them, I stumbled around through the documentation and found buffers, and buffers immediately jumped out as this is what I should be doing. But the struggle came in how I got those buffers to work with these generic GUIs. And that kind of struggle went on for a bit, and I'll discuss later on how I kind of figured out the answer to that. But initially, the first error that I ran into was that there were multiple things of the same type, and the program Tosca couldn't figure out which one I was referring to. There's multiple H3s on the page. There's multiple, unknown divisions, I believe, is what the abbreviation for this is, and multiple DDs. So what I learned in there is if I go and select these, I can refer to a unique identifier here with the XPath. So if I select an H3, use this XPath, it understands that I'm specifically referring to this name section and not any other area on the web page of type H3. So I'll do the same down here for div. Now it understands it's looking directly at that address, and down here it's looking directly at the phone number. So now that all of these things are correctly held out, I can go ahead and hit save, close out of here, go back. I now have this one here, and I'll name this to generate random identity. Check data. All right, so now this one is here as well. In this case, due to the order of operations, I'm not sure if this is a necessary thing that I did, but kind of in keeping with the way that I'm organizing my folders, due to order of operations, I went ahead and I moved H3, div, and dd to the top, and I can discuss why I went through and did that here in just a moment when we get back over to the test cases. And then for the third section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another scan, and again, there's probably a bit cleaner of a way to do this, but I wanted to make sure that I was hitting the same steps repeatedly. So I know that I'm going to have the same page name. So as you can see here, it's gender random, Hobbit, and Denmark. So even though I'm going to hit the same things and hit generate, I'll get a new name, I'll get a new address, phone number, etc. The page name URL will still be the same. So in this case, since I only needed to do 2 cases, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pick name, address, and phone number for here, and I'm going to be done. And then same thing here, I'll have to hit XPath. I don't know where they went. Let me retry this. Sorry, I think I'm having a bit of a... computer's having a hard time with the running the scanner at the same time. Okay, let me fully try to redo this. So we'll add a new one. Okay. Select from the screen these 3 items. Be done. Okay, so now we'll select H3. Why is it doing that? I apologize. Just adds a little more fun, right? I can see if I can also learn how to video edit in the same time, and I can remove that, but I doubt it. So we'll come in here, we'll get, again, the name, the address, the phone number, and you can see as you go through there will be other things. So here's another DD as a conflictor, there's another DD. So okay, we'll hit done. Select H3, the XPath, division XPath, and also DD XPath, and then we will save and close that out. Come back over here. We now have this third item, and we will call this. What should we call this? Let's say we'll call this buffer compare. Okay, so we've now created our 3 modules, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to bring these modules plus other modules into our test case in order to create the case that we discussed earlier, which is opening up our website, navigating to the page, generating a random name, storing the name, the address, the phone number, and then generating another random name and checking to make sure that those two names don't match. And then closing out the browser if that's the case. So in order to do that, we need to jump into our first step, which is we need to first open the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this and open up the standard modules, which are part of the imported workspace that we used at the start to build our project. So we're going to enter standard modules, do some T-Box automation tools. We are going to do process operations. And here we find the T-Box start program, which is a basic function that's brought in with the workspace, and what it does is exactly what it says. You fire it up and it starts a program. So I'm going to drag this into our generate random person, and that's going to jump up at the start as our first automated task. And if you click down here at the arrow, you'll expand out what the arguments are for this specific module. So in this case, we want to open Internet Explorer, and Internet Explorer is at this, let's see here, sorry. So I had the path saved. You're going to put the whole path in, so whatever drive it's in, you'll get navigate to your Internet Explorer executable. And then as an argument, down at the bottom, you can supply the system with what website you want to go to first. So the first thing that we're going to do as an input is we're going to say, go ahead and input this fake name generator website. Let me make sure I don't have an extra enter in here. Okay, good. So now in this case, if we come up here, we should be able to run the program, which is to press F6. So we should be able to run this, and it should, start up Internet Explorer. And close that out. So it navigated successfully, but it started up Internet Explorer and brought us to the fake name generator. Okay, so that's our first one. Pretty simple. It was already set up in the system. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is, since we're on the page that we wanted to start utilizing these next checks, we'll drag in the generate random identity into the generate random person. It'll show up as the next step. So whenever you bring in a new module, it puts it at the bottom as the next lowest step. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this since we know it's functioning as intended. I'm going to bring this up. So here, we're going to add action modes. So these action modes are all based on the type of item that you're looking to do. So in this case, since we're looking to send in a command, we're going to use the input action. So we're going to input in nameset, in generate, and in country. So in nameset, you'll see here, since it's a list that we're pulling directly from the site, Tosca automatically analyzes it, so we'll get a drop-down menu of what we're picking. So in this case, we wanted to pick Hobbit, we wanted to pick Denmark, so we'll do that. And then in the case of generate, it's a button. So the only thing we want to do with generate is we want to hit click. So in this case, when we run it, and I'm not going to go through each step in this to run them because we'll just get to that whole thing in the end when I run it from top to bottom. But in this case, provided you have this website running, it's going to do this, open it up, we're going to go to our website, it's going to enter Hobbit, Denmark, and then click, and it will send us to the generated page, which brings us to our next step. Okay, we've generated our first random name. Let's now go to our next task, which is to save these three items and then generate a new set. So since we're generating a new set, we can go ahead, we know what we're doing here, we're immediately inputting same thing. So we're going to be inputting Hobbit. We are going to be inputting Denmark, and we are going to be clicking. So this is the area where I would definitely say I had the most struggle was in this section right here, in dealing with H3 div and DD, which I kind of discussed, and knowing that I needed the buffer, but not knowing how to go about that. So initially, I just messed around with buffers for a while and couldn't really see where the error was coming in. Basically, the problem I ran into was that I couldn't find a control group for generic GUI, which I understand is that's just the way the program functions. It doesn't have specific tasks set up for this, so it didn't know how to buffer it, and I wasn't sure the workaround for that. So there were a couple things that I tried to do. They didn't work. I even looked at, what was the name of that? Some type of extra action thing. I don't remember off the top of my head. But in looking through the support forums and all that, I eventually found that inner text was sort of the go-to to get that functionality to work. And the problem that I ran into with inner text was initially I thought when I made my module I had to add the inner text to it. So I found that, I added inner text in, and then I ran into the problem where when it reloaded the page, since I was identifying these items by their inner text, it no longer found that inner text. So let's say it didn't find the specific name that I had listed. And so it no longer identified that item, and it would not allow me to use it. It said that the element no longer existed. So I had to roll that back, and then take inner text out, and then finally kind of figured out how to go about doing this. So the first thing that you need to do is up here in the columns, you can right click in here into the column chooser, and we're going to need to add the action property column. So I'll drag this in here. And what the action property column does is that it allows us to find the inner text property that we're trying to use and bring that in as the actionable item for this generic GUI. And so to kind of explain what that is, so we come in here and we want to do a buffer. So what a buffer is a buffer is essentially a variable. It's a saved item that's used over the course of this test case that we can then reference at a later time for value comparisons. So in this case, I will call this one name. I will call this I'll call it address, and I will call this phone. So in this case, we're assigning something out of the name to a variable of type name. And this is what I was trying to get to work for a very long time until I discovered the action property set. When in here, I can say that we need to look specifically at the inner text. And what this is going to do is it's going to now assign inner text to the name buffer. So I'll do the same here. Inner text and inner text. And make sure in these, if there's an additional space in there, then there's an enter somewhere along the way that should not be there. We just want to make sure that all of them don't have any extra characters. Okay, so our inner text is now set. We have name, address, and phone. So now, at this first page, so we've now generated one random name, one random identity, and that identity on this new page now has its name, address, and phone number stored. And now we've generated a new ID. So in that case, we're going to come over here, we're going to grab the buffer compare, we're going to move that in, okay, and now we have essentially the same thing here. But in this case, we have a new name, we have a new address, and we have a new phone number. And so what we want to do as part of the verification process is we want to come in here and we want to verify. So in each of these cases, we're not trying to create a new buffer. We are instead comparing the current values to what was saved previously. And so the nomenclature for this is as follows. So we need to do a B, which means we are pulling a value, a buffer. And so the buffer name is name, and then we close the buffer comparison. And in this case, we're going to do B address. And over here, we're going to do B phone. Oops, that's the wrong thing. Phone. And same thing here, we want to make sure we know what we're comparing, so we are comparing inner text. And one last item, you'll notice here it's double equals, which means that we are looking to see if they are exactly equal. That's actually the opposite of the case we want to do. We want to make sure that they are not equal. If they are not equal, then we are able to continue. So we'll change these over to not equal. Alright, so now what we're doing, again, multi-step process here, I'll close these up. We are starting IE, going to the web page, generating a random Hobbit from Denmark, figuring out its name, phone number, and address, saving those, creating a new random Hobbit from Denmark, and comparing to make sure that the name, address, and phone number of the new person generated does not match the original one, to say we have an actual unique new character. Okay, so with those steps done, the next thing that we need to do is we need to take a screenshot of the application. So we're going to go in here, and again, this is another standard item. So we will open the standard modules, which we've already done, into automation tools, also already done, and we'll do basic Windows operations. So we'll close this up, open up basic Windows operations, and have tbox take screenshot. I'll move this in. And the layout here is we just want to set the file name. So in this case, I'll do demo screen. The environment is whether you're on mobile or desktop. It's desktop by default, and since we're currently running on desktop, there's no need to change it. And the directory is automatically set to inside your Tosca commander. There's a screenshot folder. So you can change that in the environment settings. In this case, there's no need to. I'll just run it here. So this is a very simple way to just automatically have the process take a screenshot. And then finally, our last step for the actual run command itself is that we need to then close the program. So in this case, inside the tbox engines folder in standard modules, in HTML, we have the close browser option. So I'll drag this in. Oh, I'm sorry. That was actually an old step. So this was, so to explain that, I had the close browser option, and what that was initially was you can use it to close tabs inside the program itself, but in this case, if I wanted to actually close IE with, regardless of how many tabs are open, what I would do is I would make a duplicate of the start program. I'll rename this to end program. And what we'll do here is, instead of the path being this program that we're trying to open, we're going to feed it the command task kill, which is a native Windows task. So we're going to say, hey, Windows, please use the task kill command. And we want to use that task kill command on IM and iExplorer.exe. So we're going to give the task kill command the following arguments, which is going to immediately fire off a kill command for the Internet Explorer application. And that should close out the program as a whole. So one other step that I found that I had to do the last time I did this and ran it was I had to come into project settings, and I had to change, where is this? Settings, tbox, synchronization. Oh, it's already set. Okay, so initially this was set to 10,000 synchronization timeout, and I found that I was having trouble between the start program and generate steps, where I guess starting Internet Explorer and actually firing up onto the random website, random name generator website, was taking longer than the allocated time, so I upped it to allow for a bit more of a delay. And that should be now working as intended. So we'll go ahead and starting from the very top, which is the full process. So I selected the default task. I'll press F6 and we'll run through and then see if this all pans out like it should. Alright, so it has opened up the page. It's now loaded. We should be seeing relatively soon Hobbit and Denmark go through. Okay, Hobbit and Denmark, we've generated, grabbed it, we've generated again. It's now running the test. We've taken a screenshot, and I believe it's actually finished. So the end program did not work. And I've had this problem in the past, so I'm not entirely sure. It's worked occasionally and hasn't worked occasionally, so I'm not sure with the task kill section if there's something that I've missed out on that end. Theoretically, so we actually see here we've also taken a screenshot. So we have a screenshot of our page and my other application that I have on my second monitor. Let me attempt to run this on its own. Yeah, so the end program is not working at this point in time, but we could also, kind of like I mentioned, run the close browser set. So if I put this in and I used the name of the tab, I could go ahead and so over here, this right here, I could grab the name of this tab, enter it here, and then if I use this, it has now closed the Internet Explorer browser you can see down here. So it's another option of doing that. I believe since it only closes that tab, I didn't see a way to use close browser to close the entirety, but it's possible that I just overlooked that. And again, end program, I've found that it is a bit sporadic in how it functions, or at least in how it understands that it went through the closeout. So that's the end for the demo of the application. I hope this has been kind of what you were looking for. And then there's another video that I'll do here in just a bit over what is personally my favorite feature that I've run into when going over this. So thank you all, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.